Sood, the CEO. And from ItsOn, Greg Raleigh, the CEO. And from Mirantis, Kamesh Pemmaraju, the VP of Product Marketing.
Hello.
Good. How are you? Please have seats. All right, gentlemen, I'll stand over here with the table and scribble, and we'll have this conversation. So let me see. The topic of the conference is really about making the connections between the startups and the carriers, or big companies and small companies, not necessarily the carriers and the small startups. But you guys have had some successes, each of you, and I'm really interested to hear your stories and kind of relating about some of the ways you got there. Maybe we can start with a couple of quick thoughts, a self-introduction, and then from there go into discussions. That sound good?
Yeah.
All right, sure. Biren, are you good to start?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
So Biren, Sood, I'm the CEO of Vasona Networks. So we're basically a company that's in the infrastructure space, and we're trying to help the mobile operators really migrate their networks to be data friendly. And that may sound a bit funny because carriers have been in the data business for a long time, but if you really look at the mobile business and the carrier business, it's really been primarily a voice business for a long time. And obviously with the advent of the iPhone, data started to explode, and now they've had to really migrate their infrastructure to be more data friendly. Now, if you work closely with the operators like we've been doing for a few years now, and you look at the KPIs they use to manage their networks, to introduce new capabilities, they still have a lot of work to do to really move into that data world. So that's what we're all about, is to really help them get there. The problem that we're really trying to solve as a company is that when you look at the radio access network, the RAN, hopefully that's a term that's familiar with most of you, it's a very rigid network. It's purpose-built. It's not really designed to accommodate the changes of the data network. You know, voice is been pretty much the same for many, many years, but data moves very fast, and yesterday's MySpace is today's Facebook, is tomorrow's who knows what. And carriers need flexible infrastructure that can really keep up with the changes of data. And what we're doing is we're introducing products that go inline into the radio access network. We probably picked the hardest thing you can possibly imagine as a company, that allows carriers to really keep up with the needs and changes of data applications, whether it's video, whether it's browsing, whether it's social media, you name it. So that's in a nutshell what our company is all about.
Great, thanks a lot. Greg, you ready?
Yeah, sure. I'm really excited to be here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. ItsOn is my third startup. And what we do at ItsOn is we're solving the last remaining really significant user experience problem with the wireless network. And that problem is just how you buy, how you manage your service with your carrier, how you activate your devices. And we live in a world where we can buy socks and washing machines online on our device from an app, and yet we still struggle to activate our service, to manage our service. And there's very rigid service models. And we're in a world where I think most mobile operators now understand that to really win going forward and to gain market share and be one of the profitable companies in the wireless service space, they have to act more like internet service providers than the old world, kind of telecom provider. And that requires new technology. So what we do is we provide a user engagement suite, policy upgrades, and ways to bill for new services, as well as engage the user through a way to act on the business intelligence you have with on-device segmented special offers that are tailored uniquely to the user who's using the service. So it's a very ambitious project. It is my third big project, and I'll talk just a little bit about the other two companies I started, because I think it's very relevant to this conversation. The first company, we invented 4G. I came up with that technology called MIMO OFDM doing my PhD at Stanford. To put things in perspective, from the time I invented it to the time it became a big deal in the market was 10 years. So we went through all the work to convince the world that that was a good idea. It was a very, very different, disruptive idea. Started a company called Clarity. That company was acquired. And then 6 more years later, it's now a big deal. The second company was called Ergo, and we did the new Wi-Fi that we all use. These access points here using 802.11n or 802.11ac. We invented that technology. That was about a 7.5-year endeavor to push that technology into the market. And then after Qualcomm bought that company, after leaving Qualcomm, I realized it's not going to be about the radio or the bits per second per hertz this time so much. It's going to be about how we deliver service. So 7 years ago, we started ItsOn, and now we're in our third commercial generation. We have 3 large carriers, one of which is announced, several more in the pipe. So by the end of this year, there'll be 3 big launches around the world that have been announced. Sprint's our current announced carrier. So I'll kind of stop there. But how to create big technology that disrupts the market in a positive way, actually for me is the easy part. How to actually get that through our realities in our market, through the mobile operators, through the other vendors, to overcome the incumbent vendors who have lots of tricks up their sleeve to keep promising young technology out of the market. That's actually the harder part, and that's something that I'm foolish enough to have done 3 times now.
Great. Kamesh,
yeah,
what
thanks,
do you?
thanks for having me here.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure. So my name is Kamesh Pemmaraju. I run product marketing at a company called Mirantis. So a little bit about Mirantis. How many of you have heard of OpenStack? A lot of you. So we are the #1 pure play OpenStack company. How many of you want to deal with infrastructure? A couple of hands. So you don't want to do the plumbing, you don't want to care about the underlying infrastructure, you don't want to care about orchestration. What you care about as carriers and people that want to bring services to your end users is your applications and services and value-added stuff that you want to do for your customers. We take the pain away from you on the infrastructure side. So we are a pure play OpenStack company, which means we are agnostic of the underlying infrastructure you use in your data centers. We are agnostic of the application platforms that you use, whether you use containers, whether you use virtual machines, whether you use SDNs. We work with all of those. So we have a pure play, vendor agnostic, vendor neutral approach to the market. And OpenStack is our vehicle to get to that market. So you focus on your products, your services, your value add to your end customers. We'll focus on the infrastructure. We focus on the plumbing. You get the water through it.
Great, thanks, Kamesh. You know, there's different solutions that can be created by entrepreneurs and presented to carriers, and each one has a different difficulty level in terms of making a deal and an engagement. And you know, the easiest thing you could do in the world is create an app, like a flashlight app for a phone. Just throw it in the app store and it gets out to the end customers, and the carrier doesn't even really get involved. But when you move it over the other end of the spectrum, it's when you talk about putting hardware into carriers or alternatively, software into billing systems and things like that, because now you're affecting the crown jewels of the carrier. You have to pass all of the gates and the quality measures and the risk management of the carriers. And what we have on the stage is a variety of companies that basically attack some of the hardest parts of the business development challenge. You've tackled the hardest elements of it and seen some success. So, you know, Greg, you talked about multiple year lead times for a lot of your businesses. What you're doing right now at ItsOn is helping carriers provision in a dynamic way, right? What's the lead time for this company, and then what's the lead time for the average carrier deal?
Okay, this goes to the heart of some of the problems. So I'm going to say something that's architectural and generic, and then something specific. So architecturally, my feeling is that if you're going to really improve the market, you're going to do something big. It's not going to be incremental. It's not going to be buried someplace and be a small thing that creates a small company. It's going to be a big bet and a risky proposition when you start. And so what we try to do first is filter through hundreds and hundreds of potential ideas to find the ones that really have the possibility to change the market and that a small company can execute. So, 20 times the data rate for cellular, remove wires in the home and office. That was company number 2. And here, make wireless services friendly for people and allow the carrier to engage the way internet service providers do. So these are big ideas. You can count on a kind of 6 to 8 year cycle to get to market and actually start forming meaningful revenue. So you have to have a lot of patience, and you have to realize you're going to form relationships over a long period of time. Now, specifically, you're going to go through several generations of technology before you get your first big commercial deal. Then your first big commercial deal, you're going to cut your teeth, and you're going to find all the issues and perfect it. So you have to have a patient first customer. And then after you get 2 or 3 customers out, you can start to really scale. So you have to be very sure through that process that you have the right technology. You have to continually reevaluate where you're going with your partners. You have to form trusted partners in the industry who are going to give you the straight scoop, good and bad, to make sure you're pointing the technology in the right direction. And you have to have very, very patient investors who you keep in very close touch with so they know the ins and outs, because they're in for the long haul too. So it's a patient game. This is why so many startups fail and why many VCs just don't want to invest in the space at all, which is a shame because, you know, it's a $1.7 trillion market between devices and services. It's the world's biggest technology market, if not the one of, and it needs innovation very badly. Yeah. So these are some of the fundamental structural challenges that you have.
So you kind of laid out ideation through first commercial deployment of 6 to 7 years for something as complex as what you guys on the stage are doing. So other things might have shorter time windows. But in that, so in your case, and maybe we can add in Biren to this too, if this fits you as well. Where does the funding occur in that? If you could plan it perfectly, not necessarily the way you did it, where would you get funding at the seed stage? Where would your A round be and your B round be, all the way through? You said you get a first carrier and then you start scaling. So do you start building on profits at that point? So kind of where do the funding iterations, where would they occur in an ideal world?
Yeah, so that's good. So because of the risks, when we market risk really, the way the large companies in this industry operate, we said, we'll do this project, we'll seed the project ourselves. So because we'd had some other successes, our small group was able to do the seed round and about halfway through Series A. And then we said, we will do a Series A if the mobile operators see enough importance in this to fund it themselves. Mm-hmm. So we did Series A with Verizon and Vodafone. Because that showed us they were that serious about the technology. And then we waited until we were just about to go commercial and we knew we had a product and we knew we had customers to go to our friends in the VC world, because you're only as good as your last deal. So when you go raise venture money, it has to be ready to go, in my opinion.
Interesting that you mentioned, Verizon and Vodafone as investors, early investors, and Sprint as the first publicly announced customer. So you see that, I mean, maybe or maybe not, those two carriers that invest in you will adopt the solution, but they made the bet. You're still open to look at all the other carriers. You didn't block yourself off to only work with people who invested in you.
Absolutely, and what happens in the market. So first of all, we have very good relationships with Verizon and Vodafone, and I can say with confidence that we will eventually do business with them. I can't say when, but Sprint as the number 3, often it's the number 3, the number 2 perhaps, or the number 4 that's going to be most aggressive with new technology. They have a bigger problem to solve, and they're the first to want to solve it. So that's another aspect of the new entrant in the market, disruptive technology.
But also the flexibility your product brings lets a scrappier carrier address different segments in different ways that Verizon can be very happy with this massive post-pay and enterprise customer base.
Without naming names, a lot of the carriers we originally worked with when we started the company said, wow, unbelievable technology, fantastic, we love this. But we really just want to keep selling people giant data plans, and we don't really want to interact with them. We don't want them to have choice. That was 6.5, 7 years ago.
We're not in an ARPU world anymore, but there's still kind of an ARPU cultural lock.
It's all changed. Every carrier in the world now wants to interact, wants to provide choice, wants to be more enjoyable in terms of the user experience. And so we had that vision, and then what's happened is the market has eventually evolved. The earlier adopters are the more hungry that see it first and recognize this as a way to differentiate. So that's, I think, a trend. We saw the same thing when we introduced Wi-Fi to the world, the new Wi-Fi. It was actually, we took the number 12, Belkin, in the Wi-Fi space, and in 1 quarter, we took them to number 3 with a new technology that just blew away everybody else. Then number 1, 2, and 4, the former number 3, who is now 4, came to us and said, I need your chips. So that's sort of the way this usually works.
So Biren, jumping back to the Coach Night Car story with Greg, like, okay, well, did you have a similar time frame? And how do you see the funding of the VC and the timing, the stretching of money? When does your company grow? Things like that.
So I'd like to echo some of the things that Greg said. One of my advisors would tell me, if you're going to go into carriers, one way to think about your business is, are you doing something interesting, something important, or something urgent? If it's interesting, you're having a conversation. If it's important, you're in the labs. And if it's urgent, you're being deployed. So you got to find, I think, Greg, that's what you were suggesting, you got to find that urgent problem
And Greg was kind of saying, don't do an incremental, do a 10x type of product.
Right, it's got to be something very substantive, otherwise you're just not going to get the traction. And I want to reemphasize, we probably didn't realize this 5 years ago when we started the company, but we decided in our wisdom to let's go inline in the radio access network on a tier 1 operator. I mean, that's probably one of the hardest things you can possibly pick as a company. But you can do it. We're demonstrating you can do it because we picked something that was urgent, right? That they had a very major problem that they had to solve, and that's really what helped us proceed.
How did you demonstrate that to the venture capitalist community and whatnot?
Yeah, I guess you got to find the right venture firms that have the right patience, and that's another thing that Greg had said, that you've got to have the right VC with the right patience, because this is a cycle. Even though we had found something that was urgent to the operators, it still took time. I mean, we went through labs, we went through initial field trials, went through initial deployments, and then ultimately to scale deployments, and that did take a good 2 to 3 years. Now we're in line in the radio access network. I would hope that cycle would be a little bit more compact for someone that doesn't pick that approach. But it is still a cycle, and you still have to have the patience and the support from your investors to get through that. In terms of the other question you asked, which is how do I think about the funding? We went right to a Series A, and the purpose of the Series A, we had Vodafone also come into our Series A, the point of the Series A was really to vet the technology, to demonstrate that there was value there, and to really see if the customers were going to take this seriously and move it to the next level. That's when we did the B, which is we're moving into commercial engagements and scaled engagements, and that's what we've accomplished with the B. And now we're pulling together our C, and we're going to be closing that very shortly. So that's kind of the cycle that we've gone through. But it's been it requires patience for sure.
So I think that that's one of the lessons, that's when the gears did not mesh early in the century, when Silicon Valley expectations were rapid deals and rapid engagements. The VCs were very jaded. But interestingly, you guys, your two companies that have been around, you must have kicked it off around 2008, 2009. That's still an era when the VC community was very reluctant to touch anything telco. There was kind of a 5-year window, 2004 through 2009, when everything telco was poisoned to up and down Sign Hill Road.
We got funded in 2011. So we've been doing it for 4 years. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's still incredibly difficult to find the right investment partner with the right. But if it can be done. We're demonstrating it can be done. If you solve the right pain point with the right approach.
And to add a point, I think the VC, there was a VC community who in the early 2000s was like, oh, mobile is going to be everything. Made a bunch of investments. Carriers were relatively slow to, in fact, they're worse than they are now, but did not match expectations of the VCs and the startups at all. So those companies ran out of money. The VCs didn't put that later round in. Companies died. A lot of anger was generated. And I think, now I think starting around 2009, a new ecosystem came up, but with a better understanding of what to expect. So we're kind of beyond that now, where the VCs are looking, but you say if you can show them it's important and urgent, and you can show them the possibility of actually, stretch the money out, and we'll be able to make something happen here, they can get behind it. Kamesh, let's jump over to you.
If I can just say one thing. The VCs are still skeptical.
Well, they're skeptical of everything, right? That's their job.
Well, there's some things that they're less skeptical. Let's just put it that way. Enough. What you must have is a very strong set of endorsements from mobile operators who are saying, I do want to buy this technology. All I need to buy it are these things. And again, our opinion is, in this market, if you're doing something ambitious, there's a first set of funders, which is whoever's doing your seed round with you and your Series A. And if you can get corporate buy-in in the Series A, we actually brought the Series B to the market after 4 years of development. And so the VCs could see a real product, a real customer base, and right around the corner to the first deals.
To tie your comment just there to what Dr. Karim Taga was saying in his presentation, an increasing amount of VC money is coming from these corporate venture capitalists and from the telcos. And so there's the opportunity to make that. You can prove to the Sand Hill Road community if you have that backing from the telco venture arms. So Kamesh, let's talk a little bit about marketing and biz dev success with that you guys have had with the carrier community. How do you find you've encountered success? What were some of the secrets?
So I guess I'll talk a little bit about the funding too.
Good.
Because it's a very different approach. We are in the OpenStack, open source community. So the question obviously is, how do you make money? And why would investors spend money on you, right? So that's the first basic question. So we didn't jump into the VC funding round early, like many others did. A number of companies that were in the space have disappeared in the last couple of years. Either they were bought, or they consolidated, or they just disappeared. In fact, today, we are the only independent VC-backed OpenStack company that's out there, still standing. There's a couple of reasons why we were successful. One is we did not go for funding right from the beginning. So we focused not on taking the open source bits and creating a product out of it, which is what everybody else did. They said, hey, I'll create an appliance. And that's going to be like a vBlock or one of these infrastructure companies, FlexPod, and it's going to be instantly successful. It didn't turn out that way. It didn't work. We took a completely different approach. We said, hey, it's an open source community. The first thing we need to do is build our karma, build the credit, build the expertise, work with the OpenStack community, open source community, and that's what we did. We built a whole ecosystem. We worked with the ecosystem, OpenStack ecosystem. We contributed. We're still the #3 contributor to the open source code base. We did a lot of training. We have a great training offering. It took us 3 years to get to a point where we were credible. And the largest carriers in the world came to us and said, build the cloud infrastructure for us on OpenStack. And that's when we started. We went through a first round. Dell and Intel came in. West Summit came in. We had some initial small rounds. And more recently, just in the last 6 months, we closed $200 million. Series B back in October was led by August Capital. Right? Big name companies, big investors. And just last month, Intel led another round of $100 million. So that's Series C. So now they're seeing the whole potential of where this can go, and they want us to scale.
Here's a question. If I look at your 3 success stories, do I go, hey, wait a minute, a lot of the success, as always, is dependent on timing. So, back to what you're saying, Kamesh, you said we decided to build this on OpenStack, but you seem like you were mature and ready and had a lot of mind share just at the right time where the carrier started saying, show me OpenStack solutions. So is that a fair dose of luck, or is that a fair dose of planning? How did you get that?
I think it's a combination of 2 different things. One, the momentum of OpenStack itself. The community, as many of you probably know, just took off. And at Mirantis, we just bet the shop on it.
Just bet on OpenStack.
Back in 2010, when everybody said, it's a small little open source community thing, who cares? And all the big companies were looking at it and going, let's see what happens in 3 years. And in the meantime, Mirantis said, this is all we're doing. And we bet the shop on it. We had a whole bunch of engineers that started building the expertise. And we got to a point where the momentum was there. And everybody was looking at OpenStack and said, oh my God, this is something now. I can really use it. I don't have to be locked into a vendor. It's open source. It's flexible. It's dynamic, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we were just at the right time at the right place.
So to a certain extent, there's certainly luck in the time and the way things worked out. But you guys bet on what you thought was a growing technology, and you would probably be willing to pivot to whatever the eventual customer would be for that technology.
That's kind of how it's happening right now. So if you look at some of the largest carriers that we work with, the AT&Ts of the world or the Ericssons of the world, it's no longer Mirantis just contributing stuff to the OpenStack community and bringing a distribution to the market. It's really become more of a co-innovation story. It's a co-development, co-innovation story. So with Ericsson, for example, we're building the roadmap together, because OpenStack itself is like a generic orchestration framework. It doesn't really solve the real problems, the network problems that operators have. So Ericsson is coming back, AT&T is coming back and saying, we have the following requirements. Let's go build it together. And we're doing it in the open. And all of this stuff is available for other community members to benefit at large.
So, one of the things we have on the agenda that we'll talk about is the challenges that you encountered along the way. So you guys have varying lengths of roadmaps. Greg, maybe with a really long one. Surely each of you has had 1 or 2 challenges you'd like to bring up specifically about the biz dev process with carriers, just so we can get real about that. So anybody want to kick